Welcome to episode number 4 in our track building series. Today we're going to be covering Blender, and that is for placing objects around your track to really bring it to life and have those final touches. Now, Blender is a bit of a difficult program to use, so it's very step-by-step basis. However, you should, before you even get into Blender, you should have gone through all of the previous episodes, and you should now be at a point where you've got a track that you're really happy with how it rides. You've done all the texturing and masking for it, so you like how it looks, and this is like final touches now by adding hay bales, like cones, banners, whatever it is that you want to add to your track. Now, we have a bit of an issue at the moment. At the time that I'm recording this video, MXB Mods is down, so I can't show you exactly where to get the stuff from. However, if you go onto MXB Mods whenever it is alive again, you can go to a section that is called Track Assets, and in there is where I'd recommend you get majority of your objects from. We'll talk about that a little bit later because you can get them from the internet as well. So what you want to do, first things first, is go onto your internet browser of choice and search for Blender, and it'll bring you to the main Blender homepage, and you just want to press download. Nothing suspicious or dodgy about Blender at all. It is a completely free program. It's what everybody uses in track building for putting their objects on their tracks. When you have finally installed Blender and you open it up, it will bring you to a page that looks like this. Now, you want to press New File General right here, and this will give you, this is just your base Blender document. So what you want to do, over on the right hand side here, you want to highlight these 3 layers and just delete them. You don't need them at all, so we are just left with a completely blank canvas. Now, we have our track. We want our track to appear in Blender so then we can start placing things on them. So on your keyboard, if you press Shift and A, it will give you this little menu here. You want to highlight the top one that says Mesh, and then the top one again that says Plane. Now, this will be what your track is put on top of. However, we need to get this to a size and to a place that we can then make it work. So over at the top left here, there was a little arrow that you need to click next to Plane that will bring up your transform section here. Now, over in Resolute Kraken's Track Builder, we have our scale. We've got our 250 meters by 250 meters by 4 meters. This comes in handy here. So what you want to do is in Blender, at the very bottom section of this, where it says dimensions, we are going to put in 250 meters by 250 meters, and then do not do anything with the bottom one just yet. We'll use that number 4 for later. So now if we zoom out, this is the size of our map. However, it's not in the location that we need it to be in. So in order to put it to a place where the game recognizes, over in the top right here again, the location, the top one, you're going to want to do 250 / which means divide by 2, and then press tab, and then exactly the same thing again, 250 divided by 2 equals, and now this is where the game can recognize it. When you, any objects you place now, when you export them into game, it will be exactly where you want it to be, and happy days. Now, we need to do a few things before we actually put our track on top of this. If we press tab, this will bring up our editing menu right here. If you right click on your mouse and press subdivide, it will split this plane up into multiple sections. You want to do this a few times, so keep right clicking and press subdividing. Now, this is very computer based, so every time you click this subdivide button, it will add another level of detail to your track when your track is put in there. And you'll notice now each time I'm clicking the subdivide button, it's taking longer and longer for it to process it. So only go to a point that your PC can handle. I think this last click here will be the last one for me because now it's taking a little bit of time to load. And once you've done that, press tab again to come out of your editing menu. And now we can go about putting the track on top of our plane here. So first things first, you want to come down to the bottom. There's a little checkerboard pattern right here, which when you hover over it will say texture properties. You want to click on that. You want to press a new texture, and we want to click open. Now what we're going to do here is try and find your height map. So for me, my height map is in my track building folder. I'm working on round 3 Aberdeen as we have been in this whole process. I'm going to select my height map here, and I'm going to press open. Now you can see on the right hand side, it's got the little overlay. What you want to make sure you do is if you come down a bit, there is a section that says color space. It is defaulted to sRGB. You want to click on that and you want to press linear. And then the next thing you want to do is go up to this little wrench right here that says modifier properties. Click on that, add modifier, and you're going to want to go along to the deform column and go down to displace. Now, once you have clicked on displace, we've got another little checker box right here with a drop down arrow. Click on the arrow, and the only option that should be in here is the texture that we just used for our height maps. You want to click on that. And as you can see, it has put the beginnings of our height map in here. However, right now, it's almost completely flat. So we need to get the height. In order to get the height, these two options, we have a strength. You want to set the strength to your map scale. So for me in Resolute Kraken, it is set to 4. So in Blender, I'm going to set it to 4. I'm going to tab down. And now we've got the height there that we like. However, we also need to set the mid-level to 0 and press enter on that. So now what you're seeing in front of you is exactly a 1-to-1 scale of what we have in game. So any objects that you place on or around this track, once you export those objects and put them in game, they will be exactly where you want them to be on your track in game as well. Now, I'm also aware that some people might not just want to work on this like kind of one singular coloured canvas. So up at the top right, you'll see by default, we've got a solid circle selected here. If you go one over to the right, that it says viewport shading, method to display / shade objects in the 3D view, click on that. And now what we're going to do is on the right hand side here, in amongst all our tabs, the second one from the bottom, which looks a little bit like a picture of the Earth, I would say, says material properties. Click on material properties, select new, and now where it says base color, you've got a little yellowy colored circle. You want to click on that. You want to click on image texture. And now if you press on open, you can select your mask that you had previously, or you could go and create a completely different overlay. It's completely up to you. If you're creating a replica track, for example, and say you've gone onto Google Earth and you've got a perfect overlay image of the track, you can use that. I just find this helps a little bit more when it comes to actually placing my objects. So I've got my dirt mask here, and I can see all of the ins and outs of the track. You might not like this at all. You might not want to have it. You might like it just being a solid black or a solid white color. In order to do that, if we click on our base color here again, we can select RGB, and you can choose whichever color you like. Maybe you prefer it to be a little bit darker. Sometimes I prefer just using like a blackish color. I feel like it still shows highlights pretty damn good. Or maybe you want to go back to our original setting at the top here and just have it in like a grayish whitish color. The only thing you have to bear in mind is when you've got this object here selected, when you go and import any objects into this, like hay bales, they will also show up as just grey items. They won't have textures to them. They'll be there, they just won't be shown. And you have to click this one slot just to the right up here to then get that colour to show. So now there's a couple of things we can do to start getting our objects in here. And remember earlier where I said that you can go on at the MXB Mods website and they've got a track assets page where you can go and download a bunch of objects. 100% I recommend using all of those because they have been edited in a way that works well in game. They're very well optimized. They're not too high detailed. They've got all the textures that come with them. And to import objects, all you do is you go to File and you go to Import. And 99.9% of the time, you want to click this FPX option. This is just the easiest file that I found to work with. You might find it quite handy when you're going and downloading all of these models before you put them into Blender. It might be worth having a separate models folder. So in my models folder here, this is all stuff that I've used previously and stuff that I've downloaded. This is either stuff from MXB mods, or alternatively, if you don't find anything that you see on MXB mods, if let's say you want to have a cone, for example, if we go over to a website like CG Trader, I can search for, let's say I want a cone on my track, and we've got a bunch of cones that pop up here. You can do something like filter by file format FBX, and then I want one for free because let's say I don't want to pay for my cone. And then another important thing is there is also a low poly option. You want to make sure that your poly count is as low as it can be, because the more polys you have around your entire track, the more laggy your track will be. So let's say this cone right here looks like a decent cone. Let's say I want that one. If I scroll down, it will give us our polygon count here. And around 500 polys for a cone isn't too terrible. Obviously, it depends how many you have around the track. If you've got hundreds and hundreds of them lining the track, then obviously it might start to lag a little bit. But let's say you just want one on the inside of each corner, you can absolutely do that, no problem. So you just press free download. You do need to create an account on websites like this, which does kind of suck, but you can then go and download it and put it into Blender. And to put these objects in Blender, like I was saying, is go to File, go to Import, and then you're going to go to FBX. And if I go to my models folder here, I'm going to just bring up some hay bales or tough blocks, whichever one you want to refer to them as. So I've already got a set of them downloaded. So if and I'll also have textures within inside each one of these folders here. If I want to click my FBX file and I'll press import, and then it will put it at the origin. So this is a pack that Red Rider has created, which I believe is currently available on MXP Mods when it starts working again. And you can choose any of these that you like, and you can manipulate them. He's also, I believe there's a PSD template for them as well. So you can edit any of the colors you want on these. I will show you how to do that in a second. But let's say I want this long bale right here. What you can do is just click on it to select it. And then there's two methods here to move stuff around. You can either use the transform section on the right hand side, where if I kind of drag or type numbers in, I can move it about. You can also move it on the y-axis, on Z, you can do up and down, and rotation, you can spin it around at an angle as well. One thing that I prefer doing, which I think you should get into a habit of doing, is on the left hand side, we've got our 4 directional arrows here that says move. That will give us this little interface right here. And if you hold these arrows instead, you can move them this way. The reason I like doing this, I feel like it gives me a little bit more precision. And also, if I wanted to move multiple objects at once, so let's say I wanted to move both of these, if you rotate it with this, they won't really rotate properly, or they won't do both of them at the same time. So if I've got both of these selected and I go to rotate, it only does the one, not both. Whereas if I have use this tool on the left hand side, once I have done moving them both wherever I want to move them, I press the tool just below that says rotate. I can rotate them both at the same time, the same amount. So I'd recommend staying away from the transform on the right hand side over here. I would recommend using the tools down on the left. Alternatively, for whatever reason, if you want a really, really big bale, you can click on one further down that says scale, and you can make the bales as tall as you want. You can make them as wide as you want. You can make them as thick as you want if you want some real girthy boys as well. So just a few different things that you can do there to move your bales around. But for now, I just want my bales to be moved over here. So I'll get the move tool out. We'll move it along in this direction, and we'll start placing our bales. What's the easiest way to place these so we can do them? So if we move one over here, we can start lining it up with our track. Now, what you'll find is these bales, they go through the floor a little bit, so I'm just going to move it up until it's at the right level. And also to move around, I don't think we even mentioned how to move around in Blender yet. It's very, very awkward. If you click down your scroll wheel, you can rotate. If you hold shift and click down your scroll wheel, then you can move around when you move your mouse. You can zoom in and out with the scroll wheel. But yeah, clicking does nothing. You can't use like WASD to move around or anything. It's all done with scroll wheel to rotate and shift and move your mouse to move about. A little bit of a pain in the bum. Also, if you're struggling to line things up, if you press the number 7 on your keyboard, then it'll give you a perfect top-down view, which some people might like. So let's say I want these bales to be all in a completely straight line along here, but I wasn't sure if it was going to run over the edges or anything. I could just have a quick look along the line and see that, yep, that position's absolutely fine for the entire way across. We can do that. Or if I want this bale to be on the face of this jump rather than flat on the floor, then I can move it along a little bit and move it up. And then if I get my rotation tool out here, we can then go about rotating it and moving it up and down until it kind of fits our preference. For one little tools like this, I would actually not mind you using the transform on the right, so then you haven't got to keep clicking in and out different things. There you go. You can see we've got our bale placed on the face of this jump now. And let's say you're using a supercross track like me. I think the quickest way of doing things is if I place all of my bales on the right hand side of this track until we get to the corner, you can then copy them all, paste them all, and move them all over to the other side at once, which will save you a bunch of time. One other thing that is actually a good practice to get into, which I forgot, and I apologise for this because now the order will be a little bit messed up, is right now we can accidentally move our plane about, and we don't want that at all. We want it to be locked in place as much as possible. So if you have your plane selected, and at the top right there's a little filter box, and you want to click the button here that should be greyed out, that it almost just looks like a cursor. You want to click on that, close the filter box, and now we've got this cursor has appeared next to all of our layers. If you just click it on the plane layer, this will lock the plane in place. So the plane cannot accidentally be moved, it cannot accidentally be duplicated or anything. It is locked in place. Now, with our bows, because I know that each one of these 6 singles for me is exactly the same height when I was making them, we only actually have to do one. So if I select both of these bows, Control C, Control V, copy and paste, I can just move them along over to the next one, and it just saves you a whole bunch of time, because placing bows can be one of the most tedious tasks to do. So finding any little shortcut that you can is a big W in my opinion. So as we go along and we place these, making good progress. Let's go along to this last one is not the same size, because if you remember I dragged it out a little bit. So we can just make the relative change that we need to this one and this one only. Let's delete that one. We had an extra one there that we didn't need, and place that about there. So now we've got our full one side of the track done. To make life easier for ourselves, if we highlight them all, Control Copy, Control Paste, and then we just move them all over to the other side. Now, you can move around a little bit, get different angles to see how far off to the side you want the bows to be placed. Bear in mind, if you go to about here, so you go too far, then it kind of looks a little bit unrealistic. You'll have bows slightly floating off the side, so it's worth trying to be as precise as possible when placing them where you want them to go. And that is essentially the easiest way of going about doing rhythm lanes. For corners, if you go and watch Agitato's Blender tutorial, which I'll link in the description for you, you can use what is called a Bezier curve. So you could draw a curve around the corner, and then Blender will start placing the bows for you automatically. I kind of like a bit more of a hands-on approach, because I like them to not look quite as uniform. So if I was on this corner right here, for example, let me go grab another bow and I'll show you how we go about doing that. So I've got my one bow here that I've just placed. I'm going to copy and place it, move it along a little bit, and then over on the right hand side here, we've got our rotation. I want to rotate it to the right slightly to start matching the corner, raise it up so it's not going through the floor, and then also tilt it to a slight angle so it matches the shape of the berm. And I would do exactly the same thing around the entirety of the corner. And you can see why it can be a little bit of a painstaking process to do stuff one at a time. But if you can find faster ways of going about doing it and ways that Blender does things for you, then by all means. But I do prefer a little bit more of a hands-on approach, because maybe you want a bale that is knocked over, for example, which you can do, which I've done on one or two of my arena cross tracks. You just have a bit more free reign to do what you want. So let's say a rider's blown through this corner and the bale's now all the way down here. We can do that. We can mess the rotation about a little bit. We can tilt it and put it at whatever angle we desire. And now that bale is there on the floor for us as if it's been knocked out without following a perfect curve. So there's a lot of manipulation that goes on around here. We can, of course, add other objects into our track. So let me delete these real quick. Delete that, delete that. I actually quite like this inside corner mark here. I don't think I've used them on any of my tracks before, but it might be worth it in the future. But just where they're replica tracks, we don't really have these in the UK. The corners aren't big enough to warrant having them. So let's say we wanted our inside of the corner to be marked there. We also need to move it so that it's not in the floor. And there you go. We've got our inside of the corner marked out as well. So what else can we put onto this track? Let's go to import again and go to FBX. Go back to our models folder. I think I've got some catch nets somewhere. Oh, here we go. Catch fence. Catch fence, FBX, import, and it should put these catch fences over in the corner for us, which it has done. Now, do not be scared with these little white boxes that you see here. If I try and scroll and find this layer, you'll see this says it's got a prefix in front of it that says basically wall concrete invisible. So this actually has collisions. Now, it's worth you going through and reading Poboso's documentation. If you're not sure where to find that, please go and revert back to episode 1, where we go through Resolute Kraken's manual. It links you to all that there. And it will tell you any of the prefixes that you need in front of your items to give them collisions. So at this moment in time, all of these hay bales that you see right here do not have collisions. So you can ride through them in game, no problem at all. However, if I wanted them to have collisions, I think this will be a good point to show you actually. We'll show you how to get collisions on these. So in the track manual here that you downloaded originally, we've got Piboso documentation. So if we go to the track creation guide, we can go and load it up. And there's a whole bunch of different things in here which have like naming objects, etc. What you want to do is we'll scroll down. You must name the objects in a certain way for them to be collidable. The materials don't matter. So we want, this is more for like over under bridges and stuff like that that you'll ride on top of. This down here is for walls that you can run into. And you'll see even has a specific section here for hay bales. So this is how you give your hay bales collisions. Now, there's varying levels of collisions. You can have walls that you just can't go through at all, which if we go back to Blender, you'll see that Red Rider has done for us on these right here. So he's got wall, concrete, invisible. So what that means, if we go back to where we at? If we come back into here, it means he's got the wall prefix, which means it's an object that vehicles can collide with. He's got it set to a concrete kind of wall, so it will never be passed through. And then he's also got it set to invisible as well. So that means it is there, but you cannot see the collision in game. So what we're going to do specifically is I want to give our hay bales some collisions. Now there is varying levels of collisions for these bales. Each one is different. So soft habe is the hardest collision that you can have. Soft B habe is less resistance. Soft C habe is even less than that. And then you've got things like soft plas for like cones. Maybe you wanted to download those cones earlier, even less collisions. And then you've got varying levels of collisions on the cones as well. So these objects, they all have to be separate objects. So there's no point in kind of merging all this stuff together. They have to be their own, each individual one. So what we're going to do, if I want to give this bale right here collisions, we would go to our layer, which is right here. If I double click on it, we can rename it. So let me get our naming prefix. I wanted to have the softest collisions possible. So I think I'm going to go for this one right here, which is soft C habe. So I'm going to copy that, go back to Blender, paste it in front, and now right here, it should move it down to the bottom because it's done in a alphabetical format. So this one bale now has collisions. The one next to it does not. We've not done it yet. You need to go and do that for each and every one. If, for example, you want all of your bales to have collisions on a track, the best thing to do is when you place your first one and name it, then when you copy and paste it and move it about, it's not letting me copy and paste it, hang on, Control Z. So Control copy, Control paste, there we go. And move it about, you can see that we now have two with the soft habe file in front of it. So both of these will have collisions, and it's worth doing that if you want all of your bales to be collidable on your track. Of course, the on track is one thing. Maybe you want to pretty things up around your track as well. So if you go to import and FBX, I believe I also have models for some easy ups, which again is made by Red Rider, which is why I always thank Red Rider in all of my track releases because he's made so much for the community at this point. So if I click my FBX here, we now have all of our easy up tents as well. And there is also like PSD files that come with these. I just want to make sure they are the correct height. You can see right now the feet of them are going through the floor. So if I just select it, I can select all of them at once actually. Select them all. And we'll use our move tool to move it up to it's just about level with the floor. And now they're all level. Now to change a color of this, which I've had to do on some of my replica tracks, is let me just click on anyone here. So sorry, Paramoto, you've been selected as the as the one to remove today. If you go over to base color right here, we'll hit our little drop down. We can click on the file that says open image. I have saved some already, so I will go to my models file. I will go down to my easy ups file and maps. Now I've saved a whole bunch of these myself. Some of these come by default, like Navo's got a tent himself, Paramoto's got a tent, Rubes has a tent, so on and so forth. However, I made some for the real life arena cross teams. So to do that, I'm just going to click on which team do we want. I'll just do the usual arena cross tent, open image, and right there, I've got my own custom tent in game that I can move around and just decorate my pits area however you desire. Now, very, very important thing that you need to do when you are adding textures to all of these, you have two options. You can either save them as a TJ file, which is a Targa file, which you'll remember from our previous episode, or you can save them as a DDS file. Now, if you have any images that use a texture that is a PNG, it will give you an error when you go to load it in game, and it will not have a texture. That's just how MXBikes reads things. I would recommend using DDS files as much as possible because it reduces file size. If you're unsure about DDS files, because it requires, at least in my scenario where I use Photoshop to save things, it requires a extra plugin for Photoshop, then just use TGA, just use Targa. The file size at the end will be a little bit bigger, but I feel like it's a bit more convenient to use TGA. All of these, if I go into my files right now, because I've got to the point where I now have DDS files working okay, I'll go to my easy apps, go to maps. You'll see all of these are DDS files. You can also use GIMP. I think GIMP lets you save as a DDS by default without an additional plugin. If you're using Photoshop, then you'll need an external plugin to be able to save things as DDS, which is a bit of a shame. But up to you, either TGA or DDS, it doesn't matter. So let's just say we're now at the point where we've got all of our objects covering our entire track, and we want to start putting them in game. What you need to do is, first of all, I wouldn't recommend that, let's say my entire track is filled here. I would not recommend exporting everything at once because it could throw out some errors. It could take forever to load as well. So let's say that I just want all of my bales to be put into game. I'd find all of my bales. So for me, I've got my collidable bale here. I've got all of these single bales over there in the corner. I've also got all of these bales. You'd go through and just select them all, which I'll just quickly do like this as well. Let's select all of these. So I've got all of my bales selected here. If you go over to the top left where it says File, and you go to Export, and you want to export as FBX as well, same as when you was importing, it will give you this menu here. Now, this is important. On the right-hand side, you want to click the box that says Selected Objects. You also want to click Mesh down here. So Mesh is the only one that is highlighted. Now, you can save them in your track file. So for me, it would be, let's just go up a bit. Let me try and find my file. So it would be in my tracks folder. It would be in my UK AX Round 3 Aberdeen folder. And I'm just going to put it in here for now. You can name this whatever you want. I like naming things a little bit easier. So this is just going to be called bales.fbx, and you're just going to press export. And that's it. It exports very, very quickly from Blender. So if we load up our Resolute Kraken track builder and we go down on the bottom right-hand side, we have an FBX to EDF. This is also one of the tools that we installed in episode 1 at the very, very beginning. And it'll give you two boxes here. It'll give you your dialog box, and it'll give you your main FBX to EDF box. What you want to do is press the load button at the top right of this box. Go to your track, so track building, tracks, Aberdeen, and you can see we've got our bales.fbx file that we've put into here. Click on it, you press open, and then you press save. And you're going to just name it exactly the same thing. I just call it bales, and it will be changed from an FBX file to an EDF file. You press save, and then you press convert at the bottom left, and it'll run through it all. You see, that was very, very quick. When it says ending log here, it is finished. The reason it's quick is we've only got a couple of bales that we put in. In my experience, I also have a massive stadium that was made for me that I put over top of it. That can take a little bit longer, like a minute or two. But for little things like that, it's very, very straightforward and does not take long at all. So once that's done, we can exit. So now, if we go along into our Resolute Kraken track builder and go to the third tab over at the top, which says Scenes, we want to add a scene, and we press Select. And now we can go and find our EDF file, which, as you can see, is right here waiting for us. And we will open that. It says the selected file is not in the models folder you selected for the project. To use it, it must be moved. Press OK. Again, W Resolute Kraken, it does everything for you, puts everything in the right place. And now we will press Build All, and we should hopefully, with our fingers crossed, next time we load up the map, we will be able to see all of those bales in game. Right, we are in game now, and I can already see them over on the right hand side. I was about to say, I hope that this has worked. So if we go into free roam, we'll move our camera around. So we have now got our bales on the track, as you can see. They're looking very, very lovely indeed. They look nice with this lighting as well. I think I might have to stick with this lighting. If you remember back in the last episode, I said that, or episode 2 actually, sorry, not the last one. it's worth when you're testing tracks out to have the lighting quite low down so it hits the jumps from the side. So right now the sun is coming from this direction, hitting the side of these jumps and reflecting a shadow this way. I quite like that. It looks very like very late in the afternoon, like sunset kind of vibes. But yeah, as we move around, we can see our bows now. This one's flown a little bit from some just terrible positioning by me. But these other ones, they're starting to match the way the track goes. This one's starting to go up and around the berm there. These ones are all lined up nice and pretty along our straight. And you remember how we added collisions to one and not the other? We can go and test that right now. So if we ride through this bow here, no collision. Whereas if we go and ride through the bow on the right-hand side of the track that we named separately, that one does have collision, and it slows us down a little bit. Now, that is the softest collision available. If you want it to be any heavier, again, refer to the Barboso guide to tell you what you should name things. Right now, because it's an arena cross track and it's very tight and twisty, I'm not a big fan of bows having collisions. I think you should have the freedom to ride through them when you need to. However, if your track is a little bit wider and you just maybe want to punish people for trying to cut too far inside or go around things on the outside, you can add some bows in there and add some collisions to them to punish the riders for trying to ride through them. It's completely up to you. It is your track at the end of the day, and the track is only limited by your own imagination. So that is exactly the process. Now, I've already got, obviously, these bows dotted around on this track. If I then wanted to go and make some changes, you can do that no problem at all. If there was a bow that wasn't lined up properly, we go back into Blender. Maybe this was too far over to the right. I want to move that one. I want to move that one. Then all you do is just select your bows again that you did previously. We'll do File. We'll do Export. We'll do FBX. Make sure it is set to Selected Objects and Mesh. And you'll just overwrite the previous FBX file that you made. So Export. And then we go back into our Resolute Kraken track builder, back into FBX to EDF. We will load what we just saved again. We will save it as what we just saved again. Actually, where's it moved? Let's move it into our models. We'll overwrite this EDF as well. It already exists. Do you want to replace it? Yes. Convert. It will go through the process again. It's ended. And now we can exit that. You haven't got to reselect this. I think this is just a force of habit I do. Reselect it, build all, and then next time you go in game, those bows will be moved again. Now, I did mention earlier that you want to save things as different layers in case things go wrong. So let's show you what happens when you've got more than one layer as well. Let's say this is what the side of my track looks like. This is the pits that we've all designed nice and lovely, and it just happens that everyone's really good friends with each other and all of their things go on top. We will select these ones. We'll do File, Export, FBX to EDF, Selected Object selected, Mesh selected, and I will call this Pits. We'll export that. Exactly the same process again, where we get our FBX to EDF tool. We will load. We will click on Pits, Open. We'll go to Save. Go Pits again. Save. Convert it. It'll run through the process. A little bit longer this time because they've got a little bit more detail to them than the bows do. End in log. Done. And then you just press Add Scene. Select it. Select your pits. And now we've got two separate sets of items in here. The reason I prefer splitting things out like this is every now and then you might make a little mistake where maybe you save a texture as a PNG when it shouldn't be and it throws out an error. It's just easier to kind of find out where that error lies. So if I press Build All again and we load into the game, we should now see our bows that we've added on that side, and we should also see our easy ups onto the other side of the track. And there you go, we've got our updated bows in the middle here, one without collisions, one with collisions. We've got our easy up tents over on this side of the track as well, and everything is in here where we need it. That is exactly the process that you follow for the entirety of Blender. You just go and place all your stuff around, put it in game, test it out, tweak things a little bit here and there as and when you need them. There shouldn't be too much testing needed in terms of placement because we have got an exact one-to-one replica of our track in Blender, so you can see exactly where stuff is going in real time. So it's just completely up to you what you want to put on your track, where you want to put it. Again, your imagination is the only thing limiting you in this game. And then there is one more thing that we need to use Blender for on this game, and that is adding a Skydome. So you can see, as we look around the track right now, we've just got a standard blue sky. Maybe you want to go for maybe more of an orangey kind of late in the day sunset kind of vibe sky. We can do that in Blender as well. Right, so you've done all of your objects, you've placed them everywhere, you're happy with where it is, and you just want to do those last kind of final touches and make the sky look a little bit different than it is in game. So we've come to this beautiful website here called polyhaven.com, and I also want to give a massive shout out to Bishop because I learned it through his tutorial videos as well. And this is basically just going to be reiterating something that he said, but again, it's just nice to have everything in just one playlist together. And since we're already on our Blender episode, it makes sense to do this as well. So I'll link Polyhaven in the description for you as well. And there's a whole bunch of different like kind of things you can do through here. Depending on what mood you want for your track, you can certainly do so. So for me, I think I want to go for more of like a sunrise slash sunset kind of vibe, just because of how the lighting has been set up in the track at the moment. So if we go to, let's say we want this one right here. If we select this and we press download at the top, we'll go to download that. So now we have got our file opened up in Photoshop. If you go up to the top and you go to image and mode, we actually want to change this from 32-bit to 8-bit. And I'm just going to press OK on that. It's taken a little bit of the depth of color out, but this is so we can save it as a TGA file. So we're going to now go into our files because this next step is very, very, very important. The way MX Bikes read these files is in a very specific way. So I've gone into my track folder here. We've gone into Aberdeen. Now, if I create a new folder, and I'm just going to call this Skydome, and now within this folder, you want to create another folder with exactly the same name. I'm going to call it Skydome again. So what you've got is in your track folder, we've got Skydome. Inside that, we've got another Skydome. And in here is where you're going to want to save your texture to. So if we go to File, and we go to Save a Copy, we're going to save it as a Targa file type, which is .tga extension. We're going to go to our track folder, so Aberdeen, Skydome, Skydome, and we're going to call this exactly the same thing again. We're going to call it skydome.tga and press save, and we're going to save it as a 32 bits per pixel, and OK. So now, within that folder here, we have got Skydome, Skydome, Skydome as a TGA. Now what you're going to do is you're going to want to load up trusty old Blender. Let me just start this from scratch actually, so you can see from the beginning. Don't save. So you say start a new one, delete all three of these at the top right. So we're left with a blank canvas right here. If you press Shift and A, then you want to create a mesh UV sphere, which will give you our little circle down here. Now, if you come down to the bottom right for, which one is it? It is material properties, and you press new. Then where you've got our little circle here next to base color, you click that. Then you click image texture and open. And we're going to try and find our Skydome that we literally just saved. So it's in Skydome, Skydome, Skydome.tga. Now to see this, you also need to click viewport shading at the top right. So that brings it up right here. And you can see we've got our texture applied. Now you'll notice that it's a little bit like pixelated, a little bit choppy. If you right click and you press shade smooth, it will remove all that for you. Now the issue that we've got right now with how Blender works is, so what is actually happening is our track is inside of this circle here. However, the textures are on the outside. So if you was to just save this and put it in game, you still wouldn't be able to see any of it unless you was outside of the MX Bikes world, essentially. So to press this, or to fix this, sorry, you just press A on your keyboard. Then you go over to the top and we need to select edit mode and mesh. Then you go down to normals and you press flip. Now this has turned this all inside out. So now, whilst there's no visual change right here, when you save this and put it in game, you will now see your sky. So to get it in game, if we press tab again to come out of edit mode, we'll go to file and we'll go to export to FBX. And same as our objects, we want to click on selected objects and mesh. Now where you save this is also very, very important. So if we come into our track file here and we click on Skydome, you don't want to go into the extra one. You don't want it to be saved in the same place as your texture. You want it to be saved in the first one. So we just click on Skydome once, and then we will call this skydome.fbx and press export. Now back into Resolute Kraken's track builder here, we'll go to FBX to EDF again. We'll load up our Skydome that we just saved, which is right here, and open, and then we press save. This is where you don't want to name it exactly the same thing. So we go in our Skydome folder. We don't want to call it Skydome anymore because it will cause files to get saved in the wrong place. So I'm just going to call this Goth goth titties, and we're going to press save, and we are going to convert that. It will run through the normal motion, and then when it says end in log at the bottom here is when you know that it is done. And there we go, end in log. So now you can exit this, go into background and skies, and what you're going to want to do is untick this use default sky right here, untick use default sky 2. We can actually remove number 2 because I don't want that, but for sky 1, if you select your box and you try and find where it is, so if we go in Skydome, we click on gothtitties.edf and we press open, at Resolute's Kraken's track builder will ask us to move the file, so we press OK, and that is our file in there. So now when you build all and you load into game, you should now no longer have just the standard blue sky around you. You should now have a more sunsetty type vibe to match the rest of our track. It's also worth mentioning as well that this is where you change like the actual colors of your sky. So not the picture of the sky itself, but let's say, for example, you wanted there to be like more of a reddish, orangeish hue in and around your track. This is where you would do it. This is something that there's a lot of trial and error involved and trying to tailor it all to your exact needs. But this is a place where you go to change just the general atmosphere and ambiance, let's say, of your track. For me, I usually leave stuff as standard. I don't bother changing it at all. So that is just personal preference. You can do what you want, but it's worth mentioning that as well. And now, as you can see, as we fly around the track, we've got a bit more of a, a deserty kind of wastelandy, sunsetty kind of vibe for our track. So matches things much nicer than the standard default Barboso sky. And that is everything for Blender. You've got all your objects in here. You've got your sky in here as well. That is, I don't think you need to touch Blender at all for the rest of the track building process, which is a big W in my opinion, because it's definitely one of the most finicky systems to use in the entire track building process. So there you go. You have now done episode 1, where you've installed everything. You've done episode 2, where you build your track itself. You've done episode 3, where you texture your track to make it look nice and pretty. And now you have done episode 4, where you're placing all of your objects and your Skydome to really bring this track to life. So the next episode, for episode 5, we'll be going through timing, so adding all of the timing gates and the start gates, etc. to your track. The track kit that I use, for example, will be a little bit different to this, because I'm now going to go and make it look like one of my normal arena cross tracks with the stadium and the start and finish line, etc. So don't be scared about that, but well done. You made it this far. I hope you're enjoying it so far. It can be a tedious process sometimes, but it's also very enjoyable and rewarding when it all comes to fruition. So I will see you in episode number 5, and yeah, we'll go through all of the timing gates and the scoring, and then there's only one episode after that, episode 6, which will be all the final touches, and then packaging everything together in a tidy little box for you to upload for everybody to enjoy.